Welcome everyone to our series, the second panel. I'm very excited to be part of this very interesting conversation as we continue to try to work together to figure out what things are going to be like in our post-COVID-19 economy. And today, of course, we're focusing on consulting and corporate strategy. I'd like to welcome our two guests. First, Hussein Sharifi, who received his PhD in 2016 from UC Davis in horticulture and agronomy, and now he is working for McKinsey & Company as a specialist consultant. And our second guest is Greg Thomas, who received his MBA from UC Davis Graduate School of Management in 1998 and is now a vice president at North Highland Consulting. So thank you very much for joining us today. We're really excited that you could be here. Okay, so in the first part of our discussion, I'm gonna field 5 questions that we've put together to start our discussion. It'll take probably about an hour. And then in the second half, as Jackie alluded, we're gonna have questions. So you'll be submitting your questions in writing. Questions will probably come up as we go through the introductions. So I encourage you to write them down or type them and then have them ready to submit so that we can transition when we move into the question section. Okay, so all of these questions are going to be directed to both panelists and we'll alternate who goes first. So for our first question, I'd like to ask, what has been the effect of COVID-19 on your industry so far? So what do you think are the most important things? How has the virus created particular challenges for consulting? And Greg, let's start with you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate the introduction. And just by means of just a little bit more background on myself, I'll just cover that quickly. Prior to joining North Highland, which was about 8 months ago, I was at Deloitte and Touche for nearly 20 years, and about 15 years of that as a partner, primarily in the financial services practice. So I'm, if you hear this from me more than once, you'll hear that I'm a bit old school in some of my thinking, having graduated from the GSM in '98. So I've been around the block a little bit and seen a lot of changes. So when I started in this business, sending a fax was difficult, let alone picking up email. So we're in a huge benefit by just having the technology we have today and being able to do meetings like this as well as conduct business remotely. So it's been tolerable, and it's been, but it's also had its challenges going forward. And when I look at this, the question that's been imposed, and I like back and forth conversation myself, so I'm happy to go off on different tracks. But a couple thoughts I had is when I look at consulting, it ultimately is about doing great projects and great work for clients, but it's also more primarily about relationship building. And building relationships are very difficult when you're trying to do that on a screen or through email or other means. And so the ability to be face-to-face in front of a client and not being able to do that is difficult. And I will say that is definitely going to change our business. Depending on how you believe how long this will last and the general impacts. I think for consultants to add value to the organizations that they're consulting on and really solve dynamic problems, there is something to be said to being able to be in that kind of face-to-face work model. And so right now, as you expect, we're all working remotely. I am on video calls or conference calls almost all day long. And it's just, it definitely presents a challenge. It works well when you have good relationships with people. It's much harder when you're trying to build those new relationships and really kind of expand your footprint as a practice. To be honest, I don't know how much this will change what we do. I mean, we've seen a ton of changes already. We've seen impacts on our business, but ultimately it will be kind of fascinating to see where this takes us. So I'm not sure I have as specific as an answer other than I feel like eventually we got to get back to doing things in person and being able to have lunch or a cup of coffee with somebody and kind of just getting to know them as a person.
It's really interesting that you bring up the relationship aspect, and you mentioned, people that you already know and have good relationships with, and then there's obviously troublesome relationships, but you talked about building new relationships. Have you had have you been doing a fair amount of work of trying to generate new clients or create new projects? And do you have any examples of specific challenge that presented and how you tried to deal with it?
Sure. I mean, that's mostly probably what I spend a majority of my day is trying to open up new accounts and targets. And so in the Bay Area, we probably have a dozen clients we're trying to get into. The North Island does not have a big practice in the Bay Area. It's a decent sized firm, about 1,000 people, but it's primarily East Coast focused. And so, yeah, it definitely has its challenges. I mean, I have a pretty good network of friends and former clients who are more than willing to take phone calls and things like that. But there are other organizations where I don't have those relationships. And so it's spending a lot of time on LinkedIn and learning all the sales tools that are out there, and really just trying to kind of drive ideas, try to put something compelling down that will get somebody to respond to an email. All the firms, because I'm still pretty connected to Deloitte, but all the firms are putting out content and information that about COVID, about all ways of working, all different sorts of aspects of, again, trying to engage an organization that or an individual that might be compelling for them to go, hey, maybe I want to work with you. Maybe this is a good outfit to be involved in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Really interesting to think about.
But I will say it is disheartening to put out those emails, and a lot of times, we might send out 30, 40 emails and not get, one response, which is, it's hard. It's definitely a different than what I'm frankly used to.
There's the non-face-to-face, and then I know from my own experience that people's work days are shortened because they're doing childcare. So your email goes to the bottom of the list, right?
True. And I didn't mention it, but I mean, a lot of, one of the areas that I'm trying to open up is in the oil and gas industry. And, that industry has gotten decimated because the, dropout of the oil prices, leisure and hospitality has been, completely decimated as an industry. So it's really tough. There's a lot of projects that have been canceled. There's been a lot of projects that, or I should say a number of clients have asked for price reductions. So like go to all their vendors and say, we want a 20% off the top reduction in your fees. So there is a lot of things like that. The positive is there's a strong belief that once things start getting back to normal, with some of my peers that, business will boom. It will come back fairly quickly. So prior to this, we were not able to even hire enough people. We lost our business because we lacked people to work in it. So there was a bit of a demand need on the people side that obviously we should be able to fill fairly quickly now and have availability for.
Great, thank you. Hussein, let's shift to you. The same question. What for you, either building on Greg's points or going in a new direction, has been the effect of COVID-19 on your industry? And what are, in particular, some of the challenges that you have faced?
Well, thanks. And just want to say hi to everyone. I think I talked to some of you back in early winter when I visited Davis. But again, I think just a brief introduction, Hussein. I studied in plant sciences department, just plant and environmental science building, and really unusual path to consulting. Currently at McKinsey, I think what I like to build on, I think Greg mentioned a great point. I think a lot of our work is just working with the client hands to hand, and that face relationship and is really important. Just as we talk about building trust and working with those guys like day to day. I think if I look at it from another angle, is that took some time for all of us to kind of get used to it, is because of like the way that we work. For example, in a team that we work on a client, a couple of us, we're all like locked in a room, for most of the day we work together and like live problem solving and everything, those toolkits that you need to have to basically build, especially if you look at the projects, like if you want to talk about a strategy, corporate strategy, which is today's topic. Those kind of project needs a lot of more interaction, even within the team, before you even go to clients. So I think those challenges has been interesting. And from a person that you always like 5 days, 4 or 5 days a week you're traveling, just come to be home, that's another challenge to stay in one place. So I think just to build on it, I think what is unique in a couple of places, like at least what we're experiencing is like at the firm that we're realizing. I mean, if you look at the last few times, the firm has been going through this multiple times. So if you look at the last recession or other event that happened, so we are learning and deploying all of those learnings for all of our teams to see like how we can, really leverage those to alleviate some of the problems. As you said, some of them has kids, you need to take this time, like what is those elements of like how you can work remotely from home, learn to work with Zoom, learn to change your background when you're talking to client. So all of those small things, but makes a lot of difference. So I think we are learning, and then it is really important for I think at the firm we're really focusing on like really communicate frequently and as soon as possible about anything that you can think of and reach out to, and if you need help, just reach out. So I think that's at the end of the day, you need to take care of yourself and make sure what you need and push things forward. In terms of, I think, second part, so I'm coming from ag background and I'm dedicated to our agriculture practice here at McKinsey. So so I have just mostly in that view I'm going to talk today, and it's interesting because it depends where you're going to look at it. In terms of the growers and key staple crops, we're going to have we're facing a lot of challenges. And Greg mentioned about oil and gas, and if you look at corn and soybean and those big commoditized crops, they're already tied to oil and gas prices. So if you think those goes down, there's one mostly a relationship with the commodity prices, and at the end of the day, it's going to put pressure on farmers. And I think you guys are hearing a lot of those stories. If you look online, as COVID impact from the meat production, you don't have enough cows, don't eat, so you don't buy enough corn, and so there will be a impact across the value chain. But again, the impact varies, depends where you're going to look at. Like if you look at inputs for the farmers, if you look at the fertilizer, is also attached to oil and gas, oil prices. So oil prices goes down, fertilizer gets cheaper. So there's you got to put all those pieces together.
I was wanting to follow up on when you were talking about how a lot of your businesses, you're working like in a room with someone, your client, and you really develop a relationship with them. How much of that have you been able to leverage? Like, are you on Zoom with them frequently during the day, or does it feel like a really big disconnect that all of a sudden you're just working separately?
It depends really. So one thing I learned is like Zoom is good for sometimes, it's not good all the time. So it's sometimes it helps just text with someone, or and then you have to be mindful of like how many people you're going to have, like how the interaction is going to go, and those kind of things when you work with a client. So in last like few months that we're working remotely, I mean, from phone call to text to simple, like, can you just jump on a Zoom with me? It depends on the person. And as you get to know people, you get to know how to work with them. So that's really important too, just like see what works, what doesn't. Mm-hmm. Like if you want to just run something quickly, just send it to them, say, take a look. Can I call you 5 minutes after you look and just get the feedback? Some of the things, because you want to, at the end of the day, you want to be as efficient as you want, as you can, and just put yourself in their shoes. And we're in a service industry, so you have to make sure that you're doing the best. But for me, at least, it's been the combination of everything. I'm not going to say not using Zoom, because I am, and actually my partner here always says like, hey, just use it. But it is one of the good things to do, but at the same time, I think just, simple text and phone calls, just as useful as, Zoom can be.
So this is a nice segue into the second question, which is the flip side. And I'll continue with you, Hussein, and then we'll move back to Greg. In terms of what has really not changed so much. So what parts of your business seem resistant to the economic effects of the virus? Like what kinds of things seem to be kind of business as usual despite all of this social distancing and new kinds of work?
Yeah, I think I guess at the end of the day, if you're working with a client, the way our relationship, and like if you look at the firm, how we work with the client, those doesn't change. Of course, I'm gonna just reference what Greg said. If you have like established relationship, it's always easier. So you know how to work with them. Like the client I'm working right now, I know how to work with them because I worked with them before. That doesn't really change anything, the dynamics. It also really depends on what type of study you have. So like if you had, for example, like most of, if you're working on something that you had less client interaction, it doesn't really change as much because, you work with the team and you do that, and then you take a step back at it. So you what is needed and you just, push towards it. But if it's an opposite study or something that it has a lot of client interaction, you have to be like in a facility or something, of course, you can be impacted. But at the same time, with all the technology we have, you have other solutions to go for it too. I think one thing I think I can highlight is like, okay, the, client impact, really caring for our people, and two, really, and then the third one will be looking for like new ways that you can reach out. And those are never changed because as a firm, we always look at like, what is the best way to do things. And may or may not be, as a joke, we say sometimes, if we actually go to reality of like 3 months back, it's going to take us some time actually to adjust back what we did before. Yes. So, and it just take us time to get to this and take us time to go back to where, where we had started. I hope I answered you, but that's how we work. So you always need to put your, client impact, make sure you're caring for people, and those things, those never changes. So it's on top of your mind.
Greg, what are your thoughts about that? Oh, you're muted, Greg.
You'd think after doing hours and hours of these meetings, you would remember to unmute and mute. So far I haven't let myself unmuted when I should be the other way around, but we'll see how the next hour goes. So when I looked at this question, I kind of thought about it from just where I see kind of consulting, and having been in this business for a long enough period of time to see now two major economic downturns. And, consulting moves very closely with the economy. When the economy does well, consulting overall does well. When the economy goes bad, so does the consulting business. And so generally over the last 10 years, consulting has been on a huge boom, with most of the bigger firms growing, definitely high single digits, low double digits over a long period of time, and very consistent earnings and profitability. So obviously this is a challenge. Are there parts of the business that are resistant to the economic effects? It really boils, when I think about the consulting business, because it's moving so much lockstep with the economy overall, it's really going to suffer. There are probably parts of the economy that are a little more resistant to this current downdraft or impact, and it really boils down to individual companies. And so I work, one of the clients I work with is a major healthcare provider, and you would think with everything going on with hospitals being inundated that their business would be booming, but just the opposite, because of all the elective procedures and surgeries have been canceled, so their business is hurting. Most retailers are boarded up. If you come to San Francisco, you'll see a lot of the the streets are literally retail after retail is closed, and a lot of those buildings have already been boarded up early. But then a company like Amazon is, doing great because of their business model. So there are pieces out there that are doing well and are going to survive this. I think there's a full expectation that there will be a good bounce to certain aspects of our business. And then certain things just simply have to go on. I have a client who I talked to last week, and they're getting ready to release a large request for a proposal RFP, and it's something they've been planning on, and I've known about for many, many months. And the intention was that's going to go on as normal. So there is some of that will happen. There's the big initiatives that are mission critical to moving an organization forward. They're going to happen, and consultants will be part of those opportunities. But in general, I think there's just been a major downshift in terms of growth, and probably some negative growth for the time being.
One thing I was wondering, and maybe this is just totally wrong, but I was trying to see a silver lining in this, and I was wondering if, as things start to get more uncertain and businesses are laying off, if there's opportunity for consulting, since it is a narrower project, it's outsourced, and that maybe there's some expertise that businesses don't have in-house and that they might want to look outside. Have you seen any things like that where there might be not overall increased opportunities, but some opportunities that wouldn't have arisen before?
That's a good question. So there's no wrong questions or answers, right? It's interesting. I was actually thinking about I was almost thinking about this the opposite way, that there's been this big push over the last 20 years to do more outsourcing, more consultants. And I've worked for many years in financial services, and they live like some of the big banking institutions cannot do anything without consultants. They literally cannot transform, do strategic type work without consultants. And I wondered the opposite. It's like, well, if there's a lot of consultants that are no longer working, is there an opportunity to pick them up and move things forward? And there's been some of that. I just don't have a good crystal ball on it. I definitely could see where certain aspects of the work would, consulting work would continue to be pushed out, outsourced. It definitely allows businesses. So if you think about, it's one way to not carry a ton of staff. If you're a financial services organization and you allow the consultants to go up and down. There are other different, I think we always think about, and I personally do, I always think about consulting as this standard. You've got a project, you're trying to solve a problem, you're in the trenches doing that. But there are more, the biggest trend I've seen over the last probably 5 years now is to where we go to more managed service. You almost could think about it as outsourcing, but the big outsourcing move was to India with technology resources. But I actually see it happening in the U.S. where I know my former employer, where they started building more and more, IT help centers and all that in lower cost areas in the U.S. because there is talent available. If you can do that with a lower cost resource, you can actually be very, very competitive. And if anybody has had to work across multiple time zones, it's much more convenient to be only a time zone or two apart. So I think that's definitely a trend that I could see happening longer term. But I also, one of the things that we do as a firm is we go to a corporation and say, you've got a series of projects you're trying to accomplish. Give us your entire project management outsourcing operation, and we'll deal with the ebbs and flows and the ups and downs. And if projects happen, we'll staff those projects. As projects finish or get canceled, we'll downstream that. And so that I could see is definitely be something that people will start listening to.
Mm-hmm.
There's always that mindset of doing everything in-house, but I think there's always conversations that can happen on different levels.
Mm-hmm. This does segue and back with Greg, and then we'll switch to Hussein to you've mentioned a few times about the recovery. And so I wanted to think about that, and there will be a recovery. We just don't know when. But McKinsey and other companies were discussing this in terms of, will there be a V-shaped recovery? Will it be like a U-shape? So V-shape would bounce right back. U-shape would be kind of sitting on the bottom for a little bit and then slowly coming up, or even maybe a W where we have a bounce and then it goes back down. Obviously, some of this depends on the epidemiological issues that we don't necessarily want to get into here. But I was wondering from an industry perspective, if you had thoughts on what the recovery would look like and maybe how you're preparing right now.
And I got that first?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. It's funny. So you mentioned McKinsey, and also I know Deloitte puts out an economic report. If anybody, I mean, I'm sure all the big four does something similar. It's for all the folks on the call, I definitely pick one of those up, and I know the one I look at comes into my mailbox, like, just directly into me, and it, you can read it in about 15, 20 minutes, and it's global. So you can look at, talks about different aspects, and it's the timing is good. So last week there was a report that was issued, and it basically, the chief economist for the Deloitte US firms basically said there's just a V-shaped recovery is just not going to happen. There's just, we're too far into it. There's too many things that are going against a V-shape. Could it be a W or a U? That was the big question, and it depends a lot on, like you said, the issues with the virus and the policy choices and the amount of stimulus that gets put in the economy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Our CEO said last week that my firm is preparing for 12 to 18 months of economic hardship, which is pretty rough stuff. Because that really puts us, a year from now, we're going to still be trying to move forward. To me, that's a little, in my mind, that's a little pessimistic. There's definitely a view until there's a vaccine, we really won't be able to get back to normal. I won't be able to go see my San Francisco Giants play and do the things that we all like to do. So I'm hoping that's not the case, but it does at this point, where we stand and just the damage that's been done to the economy. Even if it starts improving, I think we're only going to get so far before we're going to see real economic growth from here.
Mm-hmm. Hussein, what are your thoughts?
I guess, same to Greg. I think there's a lot of communication and publication from most, the top consulting firms. I would also encourage folks to read, and a lot of case studies. I guess the bottom line is, when you read a lot of the analysis right now, it's really hard to say, and depends where in the business you're looking at. But if I put if I look at for the ag side, if you're mainly retail and in a produce section, if you look at the last few months, actually your sales has been 20-30% higher. So people impulse buying and all other things. But I guess that's a really small. If you take look at the overall economy, it's really dependent on the where we're to which geography or region we're talking about. What has been the policy for dealing with the COVID? What are the how drastic of measures we're taking to quarantine and other things. So I think it's just a lot related to those, a lot related on the financial health of the country or other sectors we're looking at. At this point, I would say it's really hard, but we do know, for example, if you're main crop grower or other things, at least you're going to have some time of downturn, and the pricing and other things going to be impacted. And how is going to go forward, and are we going to have more cases, and how is going to play impact into how things quarantine going to impact, don't know. But also I think on the micro level, it just depends where you are in the value chain, and how because it's impacting things in different ways.
So slight detour, but so your focus is on ag, right? And you were just saying that ad companies have had an increase of 30% in sales?
Not ad companies. So if you're like, for example, if you look at the fresh fruit and vegetable sales, and if you're producing, producer of fresh fruit and vegetables in the last few months, like if I guess it's evident for everyone, if you go to the grocery stores, what were the items that you couldn't find?
Mm-hmm.
So it would be less with fresh fruit and vegetables, for example, but it's still, you'd be like, if you look at the reports from, the industry, you see like 20 to 30% increase for those. But then you got to take a step back, because you're not selling on like only to retail. If you're if you're Salinas and producing lettuce, for example,
Mm-hmm.
if your retail goes up, how is it going with the food service or other places? So I think you got to look at all of those, and how your business is like, agile, and how, you can really change. And it comes to, to your bottom line. If you're more retail oriented and you were like selling fresh fruit, less impacted maybe. And again, you got to look at the holistic view. Not to say that this is across everybody. No, I'm just giving a really micro example of like what it can be. But at the macro level, it's definitely impacted how long it's going to take and how the shape of recovery is going to be. I would say it's difficult. There's a lot of webinars that I know from McKinsey, the firm does on different sectors or part of the value chain and other like a general impact. Folks, if I have time, like just listen to those. I think is very useful. But that's at least my view, that it will be really hard to say right now.
Mm-hmm. Segueing into the next question, I was wondering, as we look into the future, there's been a lot of discussion about how we're not going to go back. What we have now, we're going to build in with the future. And I was wondering, what changes now do you see either continuing or shaping some kind of different work practice? So for example, Jack Dorsey in his famous announcement said, everyone will be able to work from home permanently. Do you see something either like that, or just more generally some kind of change practice that you think might even be a better way of working, which will persist even after things open up? So back to you, Hussein.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we're learning, and then I think there's some of the learning is actually is like, it's probably what we were doing before, it wasn't like, it's not basically what we're doing today might be a better way to do things. Do we need to, if you look at it, part of our work, we travel a lot for all initiatives or all the studies you take. Do we need to do that? Or what's the best form of like client engagement, team engagement, and then, how we work together? I think some of those we will have to kind of look back when the time comes to see like what works, what doesn't. Sometimes, even myself, I thought like I'm on a study right now, and I thought, man, working from home and with this situation would be impossible, but it's actually working. So do we really need to go back to, do those, they take the routine back? I'm not sure. And I think it will have a very positive impact on some things, but if just as an overall like big picture, if we go future, I think it's going to take us some time to go back what we did before with definite changes that this time really brought. And one of them is that, if you don't need to, for example, travel or work from the office or other things that, you can be as much, you can do it at home. Those can be, can be done. The other thing is like, the main thing is like it depends on the scale too, but, all firms are trying to like provide the tools that you need to be able to work from home. So then, as we go on, we get used to it, and we will have more tools in our toolbox to use. So those are, I think, will remain with us and will change some of the dynamic of our work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Greg, what are your thoughts about that?
I think one, it's too early to say. I think, I personally hope this is just a blip on the map of the way things are. so I do think, so a couple things. One is I suspect that we will work from home more, period, across the board. It's been kind of an evolution that's been happening that way over the years. I mean, at my firm, more and more people can work from home. There's more flexibility with work arrangements, and I think people like that. I still think there's a huge value with going and being face-to-face with your team or with your client. I know I did a project a few years ago down for one of the big social media companies, and everybody was coming in from the Bay Area with terrible commutes, and I basically had to beg everybody to come in at least 1 or 2 days a week so we could like all get in a room and brainstorm and whiteboard and all that kind of stuff. It is, I haven't seen it yet, but it's almost impossible to whiteboard on Zoom that's effective. Maybe the technology gets there and people can do that. But having a 3 to 4 hour working session and everybody's contributing, there's to me that's irreplaceable. So while I do agree that we're going to move in that direction, I don't think it's going to be as revolutionary as some people are predicting. But definitely, if you can work from home, work from home. I mean, personally, that's one of the things I love about consulting is I work from home usually 2 to 3 days a week, no matter what. So now I'm 5 days a week, and I miss my 2 that I can actually be with my team or my clients. To be perfectly honest, even though I talk to them every day, it's not the same. So I think we'll do that. I know a lot of organizations are going to be trying to cut their real estate cost and footprint. We'll see if WeWork survives the next few months, because I think a lot of people are going to be, leaving that type of business. And so I think it's really a matter of ultimately what happens. But I'm definitely a believer that being face to face, and we haven't really talked about it yet, but I'll bring it up. I mean, not every project goes well. And so it's one thing when you're working together and collaborating and everybody's like all smiles and happy, but I've been in enough conversations with clients where they're, frankly pissed off and unhappy with somebody or something or someone or myself, whatever. And doing that on a Zoom call is not, it's not fun to begin with, but it's going to be really difficult. So there's nothing beats being face-to-face when you have a challenge.
Yeah. There's obviously going to be a shift. I tend to agree with you that we're not going to replace face-to-face. And it's reminded me of the predictions in the .com boom, like around 2000, when people were like, people never go to stores anymore. Everything will be online, right? Like,
very true.
Is the store going to disappear? And then it's like, no, it's not.
No.
But it's different, right? It's different.
Yeah, it'll be different. And I think I don't think it will strike a good balance. And some things will definitely be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, working, especially if you're an extroverted person, just working with the team and other things, a lot, you can't take that away. That is my way too. And it's way much more fun. The work goes a lot easier. And but I mean, this situation right now is something that we have to deal with. But my personal preference, as Greg mentioned, is just nothing can replace, especially with the way that we work. Is a personal contact, and just working together is just difficult.
It also seems to me, keying off some things you guys have been saying, is that there's one thing about coasting on what you've had before. So it's almost as if we don't really know right now what it's going to be like in 6 months. Because when I think about not having face-to-face interaction, we really reduce the serendipitous discovery. So you just run into someone, and that kind of thing, we sort of have a base that we can draw on right now, but to just think we're not going to need to rebuild that in the future, I think is probably wrong. But it'll be interesting to see how we integrate.
Yeah, I think one of my techniques that I've always used throughout my career is just being able to drop in on somebody, especially a client, and at the, usually late in the day, and just say, hey, how are you feeling about things? What's going on in your world? How's the team doing? How am I doing? That's a little tougher when you can't just do those spontaneous meetings. But yeah, and even grabbing people, I think, I would assume most people are in the consulting business because they generally like to work with people. it's really tough to do that through Zoom all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's difficult sometimes. I mean, even, some body language and other things that you can't read from Zoom. So you're in a team, even if you're with your team and if you're working and other things, sometimes you can see, where the other person somewhat thinking or feeling, but it's hard here. And that pulse check, that definitely helps. Like take the time, how, things are going and other things.
Yeah, I was thinking, you have a client who's upset, you could always fly out, but maybe being there would stop them from getting that upset or get in there earlier or something like that. So,
right.
Interesting. All right, so I'm going to segue to our last question. Who goes first? Sorry,
I have the first. I think I go first.
You go first.
I think I go first this time.
I want to start focusing on new skills and hiring, something that I think is going to be very interesting to the participants here who are looking for jobs. So there's a few parts to this question. One is around new skills in the new business environment. So what should people be thinking about in terms of different kinds of skills that employers are looking for, specifically for hiring consultants, but also maybe what you've seen in your clients. And then also in terms of like tactically, how is your hiring changed? Are you guys really like kind of tightening up and waiting to see how the economy is going to change? So yes, and then also the second part of this question, if you had prepared an answer to this, was how the digitization of the economy might accelerate more as a result of the pandemic. And so if maybe addressing these things in a package.
So if I'm going first, I will try to do this. This is of all the questions, probably the hardest one to wrap my head around, because it is early, but at the same time, it's so hard to say where this is going to go. I mean, and honestly, the first part, I feel like maybe I'm just stating the obvious, but just having technical competence. You don't have to be a technology person per se, but just being very comfortable with technology and all the different things we've got to do, I think is even more so. The thoughts I had, a couple of the things I said, and maybe they're not skills, maybe they're more behaviors, but it's probably the best I could honestly come up with, is the ability to collaborate, I think is really critical. It always has been, but I think it's even more so when you're on a call with a dozen people and all trying to contribute, and only, in a Zoom call, only one person can talk, or you just talk over each other and no one hears anything. I think is difficult. So I think collaboration is even more important. And the other thing I'll say, and this is again a personal thing, is being really good at being a self-starter. Monday mornings are never fun, but they are been brutal ever since this happened. I mean, it's like the first couple weeks, every Monday, I must have taken me hours to, just get going and into the week, because there's so much uncertainty, so much difficulty. You're out of the routine of going into the office and talking to people and catching up. So I think there's a lot about just being a self-starter. I found is, again, it's more of a behavior than a skill, but it's one of those things you just got to think about. How can I make this really happen, and how can I move things along? And so having that energy to push behind it, I think is super critical. Just trying to take off how has hiring changed? I don't know for sure. I know I still get, Indeed and LinkedIn still send job openings. So there are people hiring out there. There's no doubt about that. My guess is it's going to be a whole lot easier, because my personal experience is that it is so hard to get groups together for in-person, in-office meetings, flying people out if that's the opportunity to fly somebody in to an office meeting to meet people. I think it's just going to be accepted. You're going to hire people over a video conference, and that's just the way it's going to be. And I think that's a great change. I think this idea of spending months and months trying to fill positions because you can't get the hiring person or the hiring manager in front of the candidate is crazy. And so I think being able to do that more on a remote basis, I think will be super positive.
Can I interject about hiring?
Okay, jump in.
Have you specifically been doing hiring since the shutdown? Like, have you been involved in any interviews?
Not yet. No, not. I think. Well, I'll put it this way. So I mentioned the fact that we've got an opportunity. There's an opportunity I'm chasing for, and we're specifically. We don't have that exact person in my firm. It's a very specialized role, and so we're going to hire for that. We will probably make a contingent offer. So, but the idea is that the person would be named on the team, and if we can find that right person, and then the offer would probably be contingent on winning the work.
Okay.
So there are definitely opportunities. There are projects going on. I have a good friend of mine from my old days that's very senior at Salesforce, and when we caught up on more of a somewhat personal, somewhat business conversation, and he's like, they're not slowing down. They're moving ahead. They've got a big Oracle upgrade. He's trying to get me positioned to try to help out on that opportunity. So there's, let's not lose out hope. This will get better. And I know it will feel like it's going to take a while, but things will start improving. And I think there are a lot of, especially in the technology area, a lot of those companies will come out in great shape.
Mm-hmm.
Did you still want me to tackle the rest of this?
We had a digitization question, which kind of you sort of segued into it. If you feel like you want to speak to it, otherwise we can.
I have to believe it will. I don't know exactly how it will. It's going to happen. There's a lot of, the fact that all of us are ordering food online. Some of that was going on before. I think that's going to completely move things forward. I'm really curious that, and I haven't seen this. I know everybody orders things, clothes and things, shoes online through Zappos or whatever. But the idea that a retail store down the street will do curbside, pickup and things like that, I think that's pretty cool. I would like to see the small retail shops somehow figure out how to make this work. It would be really great if they could do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think more and more will be doing things online, digitizing that aspect of it and coming up with ideas to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I probably answered the last part on how it will manifest either in the industry and the economy overall. I think one of the things that it's probably not talked about, but I keep hearing about is just, the idea that there'll be more and more manufacturing that happens in the US because of if anything, from the disruption in the supply chain that's occurred. I read a news article the other day where one of the big automakers is trying to start back up, and they literally could not do much because they can't get the parts coming in from Mexico or other places. So some of these supply chain disruptions have had a huge impact. And I think a lot of the bigger industrial businesses are going to have to sit down and go, how do we keep that from happening?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Hussein.
Yes, and I'm going to start with the digitization. I think that's this question. That's the one that I thought is the easier one, at least for me. I think that's if you look at it, we have seen a huge increase in e-commerce and online shopping. And while some of that is probably because of the situation right now, but I think that would have a long-term impact. How we do things, how we buy things, and I think despite probably. So some of them would put pressure on the supply chain and how to figure out things to be best manage those things. But I think overall there's a general trend, and it will stay. Probably not if we look at it right now. If it's like whatever percent is right now, even it goes down, but it will definitely keep. From my view, it would keep the trend towards digitization. To answer your first thing, I think the first question is about the newest skills in your business. I'm part of the ACRE team in McKinsey, which is the Center of Excellence for Ag Analytics for our ag practice. So most of our team, in the team, we have from data scientists. I think your business analytics folks. I don't think they're here today, but those type of profile. And because we're in ag, so most people come in with, you know, climate change, ag, you know, other like geography and other background here. I definitely encourage people, at least that's because I'm coming from unusual background. Like I was in hard science. I did, you know, research in rice fields from Sacramento North. I was always walking the entire summer. Encourage you guys, if you're interested, like, because to me, it's like, it's another tool in your toolbox. If you know, like, for example, some of the, you know, the machine learning analytics and how to deal with the big data, you know, and any technical things, it would definitely help you. And I think that's just, you know, if you need that tool to use it, is great. And, you know, I've used, you know, coding and other things with the client that I went to. And, you know, as a consultant, of course, you go do and try, but if you know already how to code and, you know, stuff, it just like a big plus and helps you for that. And I think it's just there's a value that you bring to the firm that you're going to go to. So I would encourage you guys just to look into it. And as we look at the projects that we get, you know, throughout in the last few years or so, is getting more, you know, sophisticated, and you need more a degree of, like, you know, if you need a higher, you know, precision on analytics or other things. So it definitely helps. And like, I think for us, for our team, we are still hiring data scientists for our team. So so that's that part. And then,
have you been involved in any hiring? Like, is hiring going on as usual, or is it slowed a little bit?
Not specifically with hiring. So because, you know, we have such a huge firm that the parts that the hiring teams are separate, and then they push it through. But for our specific example that I give you guys from my team that I'm belonging within our ag practice, so we're still hiring, and we're, I think, looking for data scientists. But as a McKinsey, is really early to say, and I haven't been really close involved. So
okay, well, thank you. So I think we can move on to the question part. For anyone who has questions, you can I'll turn it back over to Jackie, but we'll be entering through chat, and be sure to specify which of the two panelists or both that you would like to direct the question.
Okay, yes, so please go ahead and start submitting your questions, and Professor Pontikes will convey them to the panelists.
Okay, we have our first question. This is for Greg. It's from Daniel Student. He says, Greg, do you have any advice for MBAs with a nonprofit leadership background to convince that they can be an asset as a consultant in the for-profit sector? Is this an obstacle that makes for less likelihood of success once employed in an organization such as yours? Despite MBA classwork, team lead on the integrated management consulting project, internal referral, I find I'm still having to defend myself to recruiters.
So I definitely don't. So a couple things. So I think having a nonprofit background is a great background to have. I would probably say when you think about consulting, and maybe I give you my take is, as consulting has changed, it's gotten more specialized. So I think everybody thinks about it specialized from a technology standpoint, or what you offer from what we call capabilities. So where you're gonna build your skill as a consultant, but it also comes on the industry side as well. And just like Hussein's very specialized in ag business, other folks are very deep into certain types of industries or business. And so I think what you've got to do when you think about your background to make it more relevant to the recruiter is to think about, okay, so I've got a nonprofit background. What for-profit industries are going to be most aligned to that and have similar mission statements? Because I think it'll be easier to relate to not just the recruiter, but also the hiring manager. And the things that popped in my hand are healthcare, which has a very strong not-for-profit component. A lot of healthcare providers are non-for-profit. That's probably one. Government is another area that has, I think, similar aspects to it and similar kind of missions. And so you just got to think about that. There are also a lot of even tech companies that pride themselves in terms of the philanthropy they do, and they would probably be more willing to think about it that way. To be honest, you might shy away a little bit from financial services. It just really depends. But they're one of the biggest philanthropy organizations, and one of the biggest funds in the world is the Gates Foundation up in Seattle, and they're also, it's run. My understanding is it's run just like any kind of financial services, but it's got a strong, mission statement around what it's trying to do with that money and direction. So it's really trying to think about. I think you just got to think a little bit harder about, what industries would resonate. My background resonate with them, and the mission and the vision of the organization would help.
Thank you. Hussein, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the same area as Greg mentioned. I think to me it's true. Like myself, a good example of specialize in a field, but at the end of the day, when you go to, let's say, interview with the big firms, or come to McKinsey and you do an interview, what they're looking for you is how you structure a problem, how you actually, solve the problem, and how creative you are to deliver and communicate. So if you have those skills, it doesn't really matter what, at the end of the day, type of project you go in is true. So if you have a for-profit in healthcare, for example, you know the lay of the land better, and it just takes you less to get up to speed. But the essential for working is as long as you can structure, as long as you can, impact, focus, and all of those the core things that we're looking for in a person. I don't see any issue you're working on, let's say, healthcare, like a nonprofit, or going for a for-profit, which is another player in the same industry. So I don't see that as an issue at all.
Thank you. The next question for both of our panelists. Greg, we'll start with you again. From ND, if we assume the post-COVID economic environment will be changed for the midterm, how do you anticipate your strategic advice or directions you usually offer your clients will change?
That's a good question. I think what's going to be interesting is everybody's business model, operating environment will change somehow, right? We're going to come out of this with a different perspective and sense of things. My hope is that companies will think more about the longer term. I think in American business, there's always been a very short-term, quarter for quarter kind of mentality, and I hope that changes. And this is not my unique thought. I've read it somewhere else, but I really hope the other big change will be is that more and more companies will value their human, the people component as being a true asset of the organization, because business doesn't happen without us, without the people that do the work. And I don't always think that organizations put as much value on that as they should. And I really hope that is something that will change.
Okay, good, thank you. Hussein, the question again is, if we assume the post-COVID economic environment will be changed for the midterm, how do you anticipate your strategic advice or directions you usually offer your clients will change?
That's a good question. I think to me, again, I think the advice for them, I guess for the client itself, there are two things. I think there's one thing we talked about that's internally, and I think part of the question is here, how internally you change, you build values for your client. And I think that's been our core focus too. So to really build on the human side of this, on the human capital side of things, I'll make people what they need, how they work to really bring their best for the client. Because at the end of the day, if you're with a team to work towards delivering that strategy, or what what the project is, you really want to have them to have the tools and what they need to as a building, as developmental and other lenses to look at. And so for internal, I think that's been a huge focus for, at least for us, to like how really we can work in this environment and what do we really need in terms of tools, in terms of what is like personal needs and other things to really deliver that, to be the best of ourselves, to really bring the best for our client. And I think for the client side, I think it's just working the same as you think you are. They're in the same shoes as you are. They work in the same environment right now with a lot of things that they're uncertain and they don't know. And I think it's just like realizing all those, and you work with them. So and you and bringing that, and just be as open as you can, and just push that forward. And it just really varies, but at the end of the day, you just need to really work with the client, and then really not, they're in the same shoes as you are. So just try to push that in. But I would say like the main focus, something that really helped me in the last few weeks, at least here, has been internally how, any things that we needed just to, in terms of like, tools or any things that I needed to make sure that I can bring the best to my client. That's been available. Sometimes you just don't know. So there's some insights you have to just call somebody else. So how you can actually use this time of others, everyone is like time limited. They have, chores and other things that they need to take care of, is not like before. So those things just take a lot of, it makes a big difference in your approach.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Our next question, I'll start with you again, Hussein, so we'll alternate. It's from Patrick Rosenberg for both candidates. And this is about internal development. Excuse me. I can't imagine all consultants are experienced with the effects and best practices in an environment like the one COVID is facing. Have your companies placed any emphasis on internal development or sharing knowledge to help build value for clients?
Yeah, I think I just answered that as part of the next previous question. I probably was looking at the wrong question here in the chat. So anyway, I think to me it's like, and then I mentioned that before, it's been a huge emphasis from the firm, and not only from some unique cases that we have right now. Sometimes, because you went through some of, like, probably not with this is fairly new, but some of the learnings from the past also helps. And the firm has been putting a lot of emphasis and attention to really bring the, those, either through communication, just how frequent, who to reach to. And then, of course, there's a lot of things around, like, the structure of how you work with, how you work. There's tools that you need. There's some trainings that you might need. There's, those are one side. The other side of things is, of course, your mental health and, other things that you might need help with, and other things as we go through all of this. So I think it's been a huge focus, at least for, in the last couple of months for us, just to make sure that, we have what we can, in terms of that, and then just to bring the best of the value. The simple things can be like how to run it like a Zoom meeting, how to actually to do like a different partition into different groups. Sometimes you think, oh, well, I ran workshop with client. Now I don't really know how to do it, but this is what we need to do now if your project is going on. But then the question comes in how you can get the support you needed to actually be able to do that. So
thank you. That was a good follow-up. Thank you. Greg, any thoughts from this question, internal development?
Yeah, I get it back to my comment about just collaboration. And, I've always had a strong desire to work somewhere where there's a very collaborative environment. Not all environments are as collaborative as others. And I don't know if there's anything organized, but I definitely feel like, with business being down, there's just a strong desire and emphasis, and people are willing to help out and, do whatever it takes to, if there are opportunities to make the most of it. So we're all being stretched in different directions with a lot of uncertainty, but I think at the same time, I've just felt like there's a lot of emphasis on helping each other, and being supportive and frankly being flexible, because you know, I know for some folks with kids and dealing with, you know, childcare issues, I have a manager works for me and his son's bouncing in the background for 20 minutes. I don't know how he can continue to work and stay going. And I was on a meeting with their head of HR, and her daughter was begging her to put fairy wings on her in the middle of when she's speaking to like 60 people. So, you know, things happen. You know, you move on. So.
All right, thank you. Our next question from Megan Kier, and we'll start with you again, Greg, and to both panelists. Have any of your client engagements pivoted? In other words, have any engagements changed scope as a result of the new circumstances, a modified engagement or a different engagement altogether, or perhaps it is too soon to tell, being a few months into the crisis? Curious about how dynamic this environment is for both you in terms of both of you in terms of client engagements.
And I don't want to be negative, but I'm going to have to be a little bit here. So I've seen projects get canceled, initiatives just get shut down. We've seen approval processes. Like I literally had a project that was sold, agreed to, all set to go, and the client came back and said, we've got a whole new layer of approvals we need and justifications we need to go through. And that's been at least 2 weeks, going on 3. So far it's, you know, companies have really tightened everything they do. And I fully expect all that work will happen. It's just harder to get things done at the moment. I haven't seen anything where the scope is pivoted per se. It's more just the agreement to do X, Y, Z, and it just takes a lot more. It just takes additional layers to get through the procurement cycle.
Hussein?
Yeah.
More positive?
Positive on perhaps, I guess from the scope side, yeah, I think I agree that I haven't seen much change. You know, that's normally stays the same. And my initiative that I'm right now is studying right now and others. So I haven't seen any change on on the scope. That's something. But now in the matter of canceling or other things, so is really active, and I think all the firms right now trying to whatever they can, and they work with the client, and it just is really client specific too. In a situation that if they're tight and resources. Imagine like right now, so if you work from home, the client also work from home, they have facing the similar issues. So what that means for them, what that means for us, and how we can figure that out. I think it's a really dynamic environment right now to figure that out. And is a really client-based and different industry and practice. You think about it, if you're on a healthcare, for example, right now, you can see the demand side and other things that is going on with the different initiatives, but yeah, it's changing a lot. But at least from our side, things are going forward. But of course, there's too early sometimes. But at the same time, client specific.
Mm-hmm. The next question from Alika, and Hussein, we'll start with you for both speakers. Do you see the nature of the problems you solve as a consultant change over the coming years, both with respect to the current situation and otherwise?
Am I going first? So I think there, if you look at it, I mean, from this talk about like a very specific example, like if people are worried right now that I'm gonna pick up let's say fruit or vegetable that is not packaged or other things. I don't want to buy it because I don't know who touched it and other things, and because of the importance of COVID. So I think some of this is going to change the things that probably we need to think about. Like, are we going to have more packaging trend in the industry? So are we going to have people are going to buy more things that is packaged? Are people going to be more trend towards like innovation as like antimicrobial packaging? I don't know, but there's a stuff that we will see in the future that is going to come out from the impact of the COVID, and those things also I'm going to use this word again, it's early to say which one of these trends is going to stay, which one, or not. But, right now, if you look at like across many things, e-commerce is going up. Are we people buying more, packaged food or not? Or how they're concerned about the food safety, for example, and how that's going to shape the future. And, whoever is in that involved in the value chain is going to be impacted, and how they think and how they operate and how they need to figure out, solving the issues or, tackling these new trends in the future. That's going to be for sure.
Greg, any thoughts?
I like Hussein's answer. I thought those were pretty good. I don't know if I have that many good examples in terms of how things will change. I always think it's interesting to look back and to think back about, the times and the nature of things. If you start with the .com bust, it's really didn't change things very much. It just moved us forward in a big way in terms of technology. And even the financial crisis, I think, was very difficult and challenging for a period of time. But we at the back end had 10 years of growth. I think this will be, a little scarier for a period of time. And then I think, business will get back to business, and I'm confident that it will roar back in a significant way. I think there's a lot of things that are very uncertain. So we talked about a bunch of them already with, how will we all adapt to a different retail market and getting our lives back to normal? Will we all sit at home all day and work? It was only a few years ago that employers thought that if you were home working all day, you were just goofing off and doing laundry instead of getting anything done. But I definitely could see as jobs change and roles change, that there'll be more accommodation for kind of that flexible work environment. So if you think about it, there'll be less and less less and less office space that will be needed. I think there's a lot of predictions that the dynamics of where people will live. Why do you need to live in a big city if you can earn the same salary working more remotely? So I think those will be the bigger changes. How firms and companies deal with those changes, I think, will be the big difference, right?
Right.
If everybody's more dispersed across the country, how will retailers deal with that? How will different businesses deal with that? Will travel change as we know it completely from now on? I think those are the bigger aspects. My hope is that there will always be projects. There's always technology and technology upgrades ultimately.
If I go back, actually, so I guess the question about the nature of the problem, if you're doing like, if you mean by nature, if you're dealing with like, what's the strategy, what is the procurement, or all those like specific type things you do, I don't think those change. Now, what is specific topic, what tools you bring in to solve it, those might change. So, and depends, and if it's part of the strategies, you need to go more e-commerce, what the tools you bring in to tackle that, and what's, the consumer, and, you need to figure out all those points of what are the consumer's pain points, and, what tools you can make sure to bring. How is that journey is going to be for them? How is it going to be for your client? So I think there's the nature of type of it. This is a strategy to figure out how you, growth or yada, yada. So that doesn't change, but does change with the topic and what tools and elements that you're thinking to bring in. So the levers to, deploy. So.
Okay, thanks. Greg, we'll go back to you. The next question is, how do you encourage your clients to keep strategic focus? I think it means on activities that are value driven when some companies are just looking to try and survive. I think what's behind this is how do we, you're looking at growth and creating value.
Yeah, and I got a big laugh out of it because I have a client that was so lax on focus. We couldn't get anything done. And so we literally we as a team couldn't get, and some of it was just pure administrative stuff. Like, we need these things done so we can move forward. And so one of my managers scheduled an hour meeting with him on a Friday afternoon. And basically we all watched him go through his to-do list and work on the things we needed to have him do. And he actually appreciated it. I found it very annoying personally, because I'm like, you know, you should be able to get this done yourself. But if we have to be on a call with you for an hour just to make sure things actually get moved forward, that's what we're going to do. And so it's had big payoffs. I think more to the, I think that's the whole challenge and issue, is really focusing on what's important and what's strategic. You know, I in the conversations that I've had with my clients and different and the different people I work with on a day-to-day basis, I think after the first few weeks, the first couple of weeks were rough. We were all very distracted. One of the gentlemen I work with literally took a couple days off. He's a fairly senior leader in my firm, and he's just like, I needed to, you know, take a break and get out of here for a little bit. But I think we've all come together to realize, you know, it's all about focusing on what's important as a consulting practice, as a firm, supporting each other, and really, you know, it's all right now. It's all about business development from a pure consulting standpoint. So just trying to figure out where those opportunities are and trying to win them. You know, I don't know if it actually gets to the heart of this question in terms of trying to get people focused, but my sense is people have come around that pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. I think that does get to it. Hussein, on that value versus.
Yeah, it's, I mean, kind of similar response. I think is, I think the main thing that is important for, you know, when you're working with a client is, well, what is the best for them, and what do you think is, you know, is the right path, and, you know, or, you know, putting first client values first. So, of course, you might have a tough conversation and other things, you know, sometimes if you think that, you know, the focus is in a different place than you are, and you always pull all the resources you have to make sure, you know, what type of conversation you can have, who's the main, you know, from our side, from their side, and what, you know, what would be the best way to actually frame it and other things. But it is one of the challenges that I think in a couple of my studies, and, you know, you go through and, you know, make sure, but at the end of the day, the client's values is first, and, you know, what bring them an encouragement, and through that, and you have some processes too, and just saying that, like, for example, from one project I had, you know, we have, you know, like our partner and other things, they have a good relationship, and how they can start a conversation. So I think you bring in everything, but, you know, it's not as easy all the time, and is the client too. So if they see it and they like it, it's good. Otherwise, you know, you would try to work the best you can to bring it to the client.
Meet them where they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question, Hussein, we'll start with you again, is with many firms giving employees the option to work from home, what advice would you give on how to maintain a company's vision, given that routines for many employees have changed? What types of businesses so I think that's the first part, and then there's also what types of businesses outside of Zoom have the opportunity to become exploiters to take advantage of the current market?
Okay. I think on the vision and values, basically, again, I think that if the firm's vision and values, I mean, those are two separate things, but I think they're actually really important, because we as a people, you know, we withhold the values, and this goes to the first question too. You know, there's one of our values, if basically bring the best stuff for the client. So that's one thing, and then the firm vision. It's hard to say, but I think for us is like, if your vision is like, you know, of course, you know, when you go to the firm, it's always, you have the mission statement, the vision, and all other things. It comes back how you can bring the best. And right now, I don't see it, because it's been just 1 or 2 months. If this goes for a long term, so then you would have some, you know, discussion around this and how this is going to change, and, you know, and especially like if it's not just only, you know, what is your vision, your values, but also come the question how we can actually keep those, and what are the things, as we move forward, how that's going to change and how it's going to get impacted. To me right now, I haven't seen much of, being an issue, but and it's too, we're a couple of months into this, but as we go along, probably, I go back to Greg's point of people before think if you're home, you're not working. So I think that changes a lot, and everyone is working from home, and we know that you put the best and how things are, and if you have a deadline to put something in forward, and you work the best, and with your team and other things to deliver. So I think that's just kind of evident of how you push forward. So that would be the first part. The second part, oh man, I don't know. Do I have values issue with this?
So businesses that can take advantage of these change, well,
so
how routines for employees have changed.
Yeah.
You want me to help you out with a couple?
Yeah,
ideas?
help me out with this. Great.
Sure.
Go for it.
So I do think the first part of this is harder than the second, I think.
Yeah.
But, companies that can take advantage of the digitization. So Amazon, I think, is an easy example. Their business is taken off. I'm becoming less a fan of Amazon because it's like their service model's kind of disrupted, but at the same time, they're doing well. A lot of the cloud services are going to do great because I think more and more organizations are going to go, why do we need a big IT staff? I got to have people on site. I'll outsource that to Microsoft or to others. It's interesting. I have mixed feelings about the Uber and Lyft, but I know Uber did an acquisition of one of the delivery services because I think they feel like that's going to be a long-term trend. And so I think there are some niche kind of business models that kind of are gonna thrive in this environment, and I think we'll have a long-term prospect. There's quite a few. Airbnb is one that comes top of my mind, as well as WeWork. Are they going to survive the economic crisis? It'll be interesting. So there's a handful that I think will do really well. I'm really hopeful that American business in general will just get back to normal sooner than later. Personally, I think this first part of this question, I'll touch on it briefly because it's kind of tricky. I think this involves all around trust. I look at as somebody who works with teams and has led project teams over years. I just have my view is that you got to trust the people that you work for, and now they're working from home, and you just got to trust them working from home. There's no way around it. I would hope that gets to the company's vision and mission is, we trust our people to do good things and to get the work done. I will say I'm included in this boat, but I'm always happy if somebody reminds me of what I forgot to do, because it is easy to get distracted. I'm less worried about people putting in the effort. I'm more worried about the distractions that come up, right when you get off a call and you're supposed to do three or four things, and then you forget about them, and then you don't remember it all because you didn't have a chance to write them down. I've run into that myself. So I think that's all that this is. I do think the world will change a little bit in terms of the percentage of people that are working from home from now on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. This has been really, really a great panel. I think don't have another question. I wanted to send it back to you. If you're all talked out, that's okay. But if there's closing words or things that have occurred to you in the conversation or something that you didn't think we'd covered, I wanted to give an opportunity for you to say something else. So Hussein, was there anything that's come to mind that you think is important, especially for the students as they're moving through school in this economy?
Right. So as a joke, following up with the last thing, the last question here, I would say one of the businesses that I would like them to see thrive or do better is the CSAs. So as we don't get our freebies, hopefully they can deliver and then help the local production, being Aggie in heart. So that's one thing. I guess my taking a step back, I think my advice would be, this is a time right now. It's gonna pass. Things gonna be back, on one way or other one. The new normal is gonna be there someday. And to me, it's like, do what you can. Also on the one things we touched today, what else you can decide if you're, MBA student or other things, what else you can learn to really bring it in. But at the end of the day, if you look at how, you get employed and, go through interview and other things, is really how, is just those couple of things that how you think about the problem, how you're structured. Sorry to be like really a mainstream consulting here, but that's the point of it. And I think just try to be better at it. And if you're going towards a world that is more remote and other things, is like how you can be creative to really deliver the best and show that the best of yourself in that way, so that you can stand out. And any other things you can learn around the journey, if that's analytics or other anything, so that's just going to be helping you. So.
Thank you. That's really nice advice. Greg, any closing comments, closing thoughts? Oh, you're muted.
I thought I unmuted myself. Sorry. Just a couple quick thoughts. It is very hard. It is easy to focus on the very short-term nature of things right now, but I would definitely try to look as long-term as possible. Look out a ways, because I think a lot of good things will come out of the situation that we're currently facing. I would stay very, very positive. I think I subscribe to a lot of, different articles and podcasts to just stay focused, but, a lot of great startups usually come from tough economic times. There's lots of ideas, lots of opportunities out there. It's just a matter of just moving forward and staying focused. We will get through this eventually. And I think I think that it's almost a good thing that the financial crisis was recent, because I think the Fed and others understand what it takes to get through something like this, and I think we'll come out of it in very good shape on the back end.